Let me start with a question. How many of you prefer to avoid stressful situations? The answer seems pretty straightforward. Stressful situations equal stress, which we all don't want more of, so most of us would probably group ourselves in saying they would map exit tunnels and create a bunker before taking on more stress. Now, would you believe me if I told you that braving the storm was more amazing than the safety inside? Would you believe me if I told you that life and its relationships with these situations, the little and the catastrophic, provide foundation and strength? Good morning, students and faculty. My name is Angela Vastis, for those of you who don't know me. Right now, I can guarantee two thoughts are floating around the room. One, a few of you who know me too well must be shocked that the topic of my speech isn't about Greece. Before you cry out in despair, I wouldn't take out your favorite part, so don't worry, it's in here. For anyone who's now confused, in a simple phrase, I'm a little too patriotic. Now, for the majority of you, most of you are probably intrigued or simply confused at how something as simple as an argument with a friend can have an impact at all. It seems quite strange at first, I know. How could a disaster, such as completely blanking during a presentation, or simple awkwardness with all those new faces you swear you remembered the names of, have a positive impact? For one, as an example comprehensible for all of us, let's use the idea of a first date. We all fear something going terribly wrong and generally pick the safest and most cautious route in order to try and guarantee the perfect image and hopefully a second outing. We'll pick safe conversation topics such as school, or if you're me, maybe the Bachelorette. Next, we decide to meet at typical locations. For instance, I'm pretty sure a good chunk of us have all used the plaza on Winston Churchill with the Cineplex as a go-to. And we all cross our fingers hoping that it goes according to plan. Our hearts stop at the idea of spilling Coke over your date at the theater, dropping poutine all over them at a ball game, and maybe the worst of all, having your credit card declined. To which I say, always bring cash. Jokes aside, though, it is in the real human emotion of something going wrong that brings people together. It helps us put down our guard and connect with the other person. We all too often believe these mishaps and errors are negative, signs of weakness or unlikability, when it in fact does quite the opposite for us. When we bowl and perhaps chuck the ball into the wrong lane, knocking down a strike for some random group and our faces turn red, we allow the other person to see our raw emotion, which as a result can do the same for them. You no longer feel as if you have to be a contestant on some game show who must be unbreakable in this perfect person, but just you, and likewise, so do they. Moreover, having something bizarre happen cements that moment and byproduct that individual in your mind. If you don't believe me and think maybe it's an individual case because I like to laugh, think again. Various studies have shown that groups, whether they be on first dates or new friends hanging out for the first time, who experienced one of these hiccups were said to become closer and got together again. Of course, don't now go and plan that first date you have at Cineplex next Saturday to be filled with problems and catastrophes, but understand that these situations aren't something you should dread or fear, but something you should take for what they are and connect because of them. If my first example of stressful situations hasn't convinced you that they are what build our relationships, what creates unity, hopefully my last one, which I hold very close to my heart, will. All of us here, no matter if lost in time or of this year, come from a family of immigrants all looking for a better life and home for their future generations. Both pairs of my grandparents individually hopped on 5-week boat rides or snuck on a plane as an Italian immigrant, not an exaggerated story in the slightest, to brave a new country that they frankly had never heard of before going on their voyage. They were hoping to escape the newly hostile political climate of post-war Greece, and more so to leave the microscopic village in the mountains in hopes of finding prosperity. Because of this, I have plenty of extended family back home, and no matter how rarely I would see them, we greeted each other with kisses and hugs that would probably knock the wind out of a few. I've been blessed in my life to have met my great-grandmother as early as 5 years old. Last summer, my family, including my mom's parents, who I've seen at least once a week since my birth, traveled to the good old fatherland for some sun, which of course came with the daily visits and drives up the dangerously poorly paved, if at all, mountain roads as we tried not to vomit from the swerving path. We spent many of the evenings with my great-grandmother up in her little village cafe, seeing relatives that I honestly couldn't tell you how I'm related to them, which was usual, but one thing was different about this time. Our last day soon came around, and tears were shed, and to keep my great-grandmother's smile, I told her I'd bring her back a boyfriend next time. You see, by my age, she was already married, and she was shocked to find I was single. We ended with a few more kisses and got in our rented minivan, waving as we drove down the bumpy road. None of us knew that would be the last time we saw her. It happened the second Friday of January this year. I was awoken abruptly to the most painful cry I'd ever heard in my life. I feared someone had fallen and hurt themselves, and I rushed out of my room. There, standing weakly in my mother's arms, was my grandmother, crying so fiercely that I could scarcely breathe. Soon my other two sisters and my father dashed to the scene, all of us desperately trying to understand what had just happened. Was she hurt? Sick? In case it wasn't already apparent enough, my two grandparents mean more to me than most people, and the memory of her wailing out "Manamu" as tears dripped onto the stairs flashes vividly in my mind as I speak. With this phrase, I clearly understood what had happened, and my eyes began to well with tears. Manamu in Greek means my mom. Due to an outbreak of the flu over the Balkan region in Europe, many elderly individuals, especially far away from the cities, had become victims. What was more is the doctor who was to see my great-grandmother was to come the next day to help her. That day, I couldn't decide which pained me more, the loss of my grandmother or the sadness that I saw in my grandmother's eyes. I still ended up going to school that day, but completely distraught, only just remembering having a test first period that morning as well. I couldn't stop thinking, why? Why did this have to happen? Why to her? Now, while this day was so unfathomably difficult for all of us, especially my grandmother, there was something bittersweet that came along, and it is the reason that I tell you this story. I mentioned at the beginning of my speech that stressful situations are what bring us together and connect us if we allow them. Well, the passing of my great-grandmother, may her memory live on forever, did just that. That evening, when I came home from school, I'd never seen another group of people give care and comfort for one person. My grandfather sat with my grandmother, holding her hands as he let her cry, something I'd never seen him do in all my life. My father, who like many son-in-laws doesn't see eye to eye with my grandmother, prepared a dinner which held all the dishes that spoke of home and memories. Even though we were all suffering a loss, the hurt and sadness opened up our empathy and compassion we possess for those we love. Where we said, "I love you," and gave kisses routinely, not wanting to see her hurt gave way to a truer and stronger desire to be there for her, make her happy, and as a whole, we all became closer. We discussed memories of our times in the village with my great-grandmother. We laughed until laughter became tears again, and we held each other for a little while longer. Finally, the most defining moment for me was when I was on my own with my grandmother. It was well into the evening, and the two of us sat on the couch, me holding her hand as we sat in silence, which was broken by the occasional sniffles. After a while, my grandmother wiped her eyes and softly smiled at me. As you could imagine, I was rather confused. Of course, her smiling was wonderful, but rather odd in such a devastating time. As if reading my mind, my grandmother said to me something I will never forget for the rest of my life. "You know, Angie, I'm sad now, and I will always miss my mom, but she's always here because you carry her name. Because you have her name, you hold for me her memory and her spirit, and because of that, I'll always know she's here." It was such a simple thing to say, but I couldn't hold back my tears when she told me that. I'm lucky enough to have been named after my great-grandmother, and with that, am able to carry her memory with me for the rest of my life. But more so, it helped my grandmother carry on after her mother's death and allowed the two of us to foster a deeper connection. Despite dealing with the hardest loss anyone can ever experience, she and the rest of my family became closer because situations like these are moments where we instinctually desire to sincerely help those we care about. This simple concept will be so crucial in the coming year for all of us, no matter the severity of a difficult time. We will face stressful weeks filled with assignments, university deadlines that seem to creep up out of nowhere, and who knows what else. The important part, and what I hope you all take away, is not to run from these moments, no matter how daunting, but to look to one another for support and tackle them together. Not only will you have a better success rate, but you will also become closer and stronger together. To my senior ones, I know you've probably heard that this is your scariest year, but it's only scary if you face it alone. Look to your friends for support, and I know you will all reach your goals and with a smile on your face too. Senior twos, this is our last year, and it's what we make it. We have so much going on with deadlines, leadership roles, and making sure we meet that weekend sign-out deadline. If we lean on one another for support and integrity, we can easily take the reins. To put it simply, if we stand together through the difficulties, but also the glory, all I have to say to this year is bring it on. Now will you please stand and sing with me hymn 656?